अभिव्यक्ति के इस विराट उत्सव उन्मेष की 4 दिवसीय समारोह का आज दूसरा दिन है और इस द्वितीय दिवस के पहले सत्र में आप सबका बहुत बहुत स्वागत और अभिनंदन करती हूँ। आज हमारे इस सत्र का विषय बड़ा मौजू है, बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण है और वो है भारतीय साहित्य में स्त्रीवाद, इंडियन लिटरेरी फेमिनिज्म। मित्रों, आज हर तरफ स्त्रीवाद का आपको दे दूं, उसके बाद फिर हम उन्हें मंच पर बुलाएंगे। सुनैना सिंह शिक्षाविद और प्रशासक हैं, जिन्हें दक्षिण एशिया में उच्च शिक्षा पर गहन प्रभाव के लिए समझा जाता है। आपने नालंदा विश्वविद्यालय को कुलपति के रूप में पुनः स्थापित किया, जिसे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर प्रशंसा प्राप्त हुई। अंग्रेजी की प्रतिष्ठित प्रोफेसर और तुलनात्मक साहित्य की विशेषज्ञ के रूप में आपने पूर्वी और पश्चिमी शिक्षण प्रणालियों के बीच की खाई को सफलतापूर्वक समाप्त किया है, जिसके लिए आपको भारतीय उच्च शिक्षा और संस्कृति को बढ़ावा देने के लिए ऑक्सफोर्ड यूनियन द्वारा मानद प्रोफेसरशिप प्रदान की गई है। इसके साथ ही आपको यूनिवर्सल पीस फेडरेशन द्वारा 2022 में एम्बेसडर फॉर पीस की उपाधि भी प्रदान की गई है। तो बहुत बहुत सम्मान के साथ मैं आपको मंच पर आमंत्रित करती हूँ।
सभी को welcome to this session. I'll start with my comments and then we will have our speakers here. So we are looking at literary feminism, स्त्रीवाद को देख रहे हैं, जहाँ पर हम literary figures को देख रहे हैं, writers को and I must say that I'm honored to be amongst the writers here, because some of the very eminent upcoming writers are on the dais and sharing their stories. This is what literature is all about, shaping the mindset of people. And for me, the word feminism per se is problematic, and I'll come to that a little later. But when we look at literature, and particularly literature written by women, we are actually looking at battle against cultural biases, stereotyping of women. This is where I thought कि हमारे जो literature है, Indian writers per se, ये खुद की तलाश में निकले हैं, अपने वजूद की तलाश में हैं और ये समय को भी चैलेंज करती हैं कि how do we overcome the challenges of the times, because literature emerges from a particular context, from a milieu, the cultural parameters of a nation. Therefore, the Indian literature has a unique place in the history of literary canon per se. And the women writers who seem to be emerging right from the beginning have carved a niche for themselves. It's very important to look at feminism, and I look at it as a Western canon. It's a canon fighting for equality. Whereas women in India, I don't think they began by fighting for equality as much as for self-respect, as much as for, speaking about their innermost urges and desires. The Western canon, if we go back to Greek mythology and we look at Abrahamic setup, religions per se, where a woman is always less than a man. And in Odysseus, I think in the first recorded book on the public voice of women, this is written by Mary Beard, who has looked at when did they begin to talk. And she refers to Odyssey, and Telemachus, the son of Penelope, tells his mother that speech will be the business of men, all men, quote unquote. Speech will be the business of men, all men. Now it shows that the Abrahamic culture has silenced women. Women were seen as lesser than men. Now this was about 2000 literature, 2000 years back. Now we come to a literature 5000 years back to our own Vedic parampara, and we have 27 Vidushis, right from Gargi, Maitreyi to Lopamudra. They were the living examples of intellectual might, contributing to the cultural ethos of India. And this was about 5,000 years back, as I said, reflecting a civilizational richness which somehow we seem to have lost over the centuries, perhaps under the burden of colonialism, perhaps under the burden of Mughal rule per se. Now the present India that we look at, we are looking at recalling civilizational awakening, the glory of our cultural and spiritual ethos per se. So then I, was wondering how literature, if we have started from Gargi and Maitreyi, we have seen an upsurge of women writers, very bold and daring, whether it is Mirabai or Janabai, or Muktabai that Lakshmiji writes so evocatively. We have had a long list of women writers who have stood up against patriarchy without really fighting as a feminist. That's why I generally stand by, are we feminists? I don't know. From the Western canon, we are not that, We believe in self-respect. We believe in commanding our own personalities. Our voices, if ever they were silenced, I think we were still very bold about our desires, our aspirations. We've always looked at the concept of Ardhanarishwari. Right now, I must say that we are in the Shakti period, Dashera, the Navratri days. And this is where we are celebrating the might of women. This is to remind ourselves that the inner core is very strong. As women, we rise up to the occasion. This is where I firmly believe that, let me quote Emily Dickinson here. She said, we never know how high we are till we are called to rise. Then if we are true to our plan, our stature touches the skies. The heroism we recite would be a daily thing for us. I think that's where, नारीवाद, स्त्रीवाद हम देखते हैं, तो ये तो परिभाषा ही अलग है. मैं इसको the Western Abrahamic canon से नहीं जोड़ूंगी, because I think we need to retain our identity. We need to, and that's where I think the identity politics also needs to be defeated. Gayatri Spivak Chakravarti spoke about how the essentialist, the reductive reading of patriarchal setup has become part of. And I also somehow believe, and I often ask myself, as to are we ghettoizing ourselves, Are we ghettoizing women by labeling them women writers? I'm sorry, but I must say this. As women writers, women artists, actors, or leaders, or educators, I have been in that position, and I've always said leadership or art is gender neutral. It's about creativity. It's about how we look at ourselves. How do we look at world vis-a-vis the world? I think it's very important to retain our own identities. So are binaries being created here when we talk about feminism or women writers? Or are we getting comfortable with binaries? Is something that I would like to ask everyone, and maybe myself, I keep asking this, why is it man vis-a-vis a woman, be it as an artist or everybody has an identity of their own, the unique features that we look at. And that's where I believe, that we have to look at, I was looking at the Bhakti poets, and then you look at the role of a itihasa. I'm deliberately not using the word mythology. When you look at Satyabhama, Draupadi, or Sita, they have all been very strong. This is the land of Sita. That they've held on to their own, to their dignity. Relentless effort. I think Draupadi's, version that has been given to us by Mahashweta Devi as Draupadi, the tribal woman. I think that's a very powerful way of saying that how women are very resilient and strong within. Or you look at Ismat Chughai's Lihaf. Look at the boldness there. Or even the recent Palace of Illusion by Divakaruni, where she gives a different representation of Draupadi. Or Swallowing the Sun, we have the writer right here, the celebrated writer now, where we are looking at audacious hope and courage that women represent. I think it's very important to look at women writers from a different, and woman writer, quote unquote, a creative artist, I would say, whether it is Amrita Pritam in Punjabi, or Kusum Ansal in Hindi, or Sarojini Sahu in Oriya, or Shashi Deshpande, who refused to call herself a feminist writer, who said that I am a humanist, I look at human issues, and I am a human, so don't sort of segregate me. I think with these initial remarks, I think I would now invite the panelists. And Anandita Bandopadhyay, may I invite you? Because we are looking at a gamut of women's writing coming from, east to west, north to south. And I generally believe that the world's rhythm is changing, and women, are giving the right beat, I believe, through their writing. It's, I dwell in possibilities. This is what one of the writers said. And I think it's very important to think about that.